Alright. Gonna talk about hot ends. Some stuff most people don't get or just never thought about. Honestly, I think most people have enough common sense, they just don't think about it. The big thing is why everyone's getting such different temperature usage needs, temperature ranges. They need to print with the same material, or even the same material and the same printer. If you have the exact same hot end and the same model printer and everything, and yet you might have to be 5 degrees more or 5 degrees less than another person. And let's just go through the simple parts first off. Let me grab a nozzle. Kinda need a nozzle. But anyway. Quick reference, everyone should know it, but I still see it asked all the time. When you install a new nozzle, heat it up, screw your nozzle in all the way, back it off a quarter turn, tighten your heat break down to it, and then heat it up and tighten your nozzle up that last quarter turn. If you do that, if you do it every time, you'll never get leaks out of your nozzles. Unless there's something seriously wrong or you're using the wrong nozzle with the wrong heat break. Alright, so here's all the parts. You have your heater block, which inside your heater block is the heater core, red wires, your thermistor, which is in a little hole here and senses the temperature, your heat break tube, and your nozzle. That's pretty much it. Plastic comes in, goes through the heat break tube. Heat break tube separates the hot from the cold, so all your hot plastic is in a small segment, keeps it from jamming. Goes through there, goes into your nozzle. The heater block heats it up. The heater core keeps the heat block at an even temperature. The thermistor tells it what that temperature is. Pretty simple. Now, first off, with why we get such fluctuations in temperatures. I need my glasses so I can see what I'm doing here. Okay. First off, you could have everything exactly the same. You could have a completely similar system. You both could have a TAS 6 or Prusa MK3, and yet one person has to run his temperature at 5 degrees higher or lower than the other person. And the general reason for that is the thermistor. Another thermistor here? I don't think I do. All the stuff I've gone through on my thermistors. Anyway, it's a little glass nub. Goes in here. Actually, maybe I'll take this one out. And basically, it's just a little glass nub-like thing on the end of some wires. Now, all that does, it sits in this little hole. Now, how well it sits in that hole can give you fluctuations. And it's not even how well, it's just how evenly it sits. If it goes straight in and touches the back wall, you're going to get a different reading than if it's crooked and just like one edge of it is touching the glass wall or the top, or it's all variance. They're pretty accurate. Everyone says they're not very accurate, but coming down to it, for such a cheap little piece of electronics, they're pretty accurate for what they are. But they're not dead accurate. So even just the actual thermistors, one thermistor to another, even though they're exactly the same, might give you different readings. But again, even if they were perfect, depending on how they come in contact with the wall of this thing, it's going to give you a different reading. And I've actually got this upside down. Now here's the other thing, thinking of that being upside down. A lot of people stick these together and don't understand that the little hole on the bottom here should be on the bottom with the nozzle side. This will give you a different reading too. If you have it up top where the heat break is, you may actually find you need higher temperatures if it's up top than higher reading temperatures than everybody else. It's not really going to hurt anything. if it's up top. It's just less accurate because you're not down here at the nozzle. But it doesn't, I mean, it's still going to work. You just may get higher readings, or may need higher readings for it to work as well, or lower depending on how your hot end's assembled. It may need lower because, you know, the heat block is actually transferring more heat. I don't know. It all depends on, you know, each one. Then there's also different kinds of nozzles. These are actually stainless steel, which are total garbage, but not only do you have different materials, okay, stainless steel, brass, but you have different sizes of that same nozzle, and materials transfer heat differently. I don't know if you can see this, but this is a standard MK8 style nozzle, brass. This is, believe it or not, an E3D style nozzle, even though it's not the E3D shape. And the big difference is here, I don't know, can you see that in the video? I don't think you can see it, but I'll take a picture of it. The differences in the threading length. Because if one's longer threaded than the other, you get more heat transfer into the nozzle, blah blah blah. You can get different temperature readings you need to get it squirting out of the hot plastic. Not only is that different, but then you can get into this one, which is just a smaller nozzle altogether, which means there's less material and it doesn't hold heat as well. So when you know, especially if you're printing PLA, where if you're printing PLA where the fan is running, the fan can actually cool the tip and make a jam. I had terrible time with this little cheapo. Each material and each size and each length is going to give you a different reading and a different need of temperature. And then you actually even have different shapes. This is an actual E3D stainless steel. I hate the stainless steel. It's terrible. I'll never use it again. It was a good thought, but it just, stainless steel doesn't transfer the heat well enough. But E3D has their own shape. This will give you, each of these shapes even will give you a different temperature requirement to get the filament to extrude properly. I mean, there's just so many variables. The way it contacts, here's another thing. The heater core comes in contact with the heater block. Okay, this is an E3D clone style block with the V6 or even the V4. I think E3D started coming out with this clamp. It's basically a slot in the block, thread the bolt through, and it clamps the block down onto it as you tighten the nut. Get my hand out of the way. It clamps the block down. The old style used to be the nut would come up and just pinch the heater core up into the block. Now, it works, but it changes the amount of contact and transfer. You get a very small part of the arc of the heater core in contact with the heater block. Where with this, the clamp style, it's like 90% contact because it clamps down and the whole circle clamps down and contacts with the heater core. Much better heat transfer. These are all variances that change your temperature requirements to print. Lastly is the heater heat break. They come in different lengths. Styles. I don't have an actual E3D style one, but theirs is basically the same thing. Looks just like one of these. The only difference is it's an M6 thread, then it goes up to either, depending on their model, it's either M7 thread, or some of them are just flush. There's no threading, and it just slides up in and then pinches to it. But that's really a difference there. Now the other thing is the actual heat break. Some of them, especially the old cheaper ones, have no actual heat break. Now what the heat break is this little knock right here. Now it makes the tube a little weaker, but because there's less material here, the heat can't transfer up the tube as easily. So you get a very good even heat transfer, and you get a very sharp thermal break. Cold area, hot area. The heat can't transfer up, so you don't get jamming because you don't have melted plastic up into the cold zone. It stays in the hot zone. These are more likely to jam, particularly when you get into the higher temperature materials. Now, there's also building the unit. Let's get a clean block here. With these two different lengths of nozzle threading, okay, the MK8 is shorter than the E3D. Now, they're both M6. You can use an E3D nozzle in an MK8 block or an MK8 heater, hot end. And actually, I recommend it because, and here's why. Most MK8s come with this kind. Most of the really cheap ones. Some of them started coming with the actual heat brake with an actual notch in it. Here's one of the issues though. If you use a standard MK8 thread in there nozzle and use one of these, what they call a 26 millimeter, you'll see the actual heat brake notch goes down into the block. Pointless. It's useless now. But if you use a block like this, use an E3D style nozzle with the longer threading, you could thread it in there, bottom it out, back it off a quarter turn, bring the heat brake down to it. You'll see the heat brake is just above the heat block, the actual notch. This is very, very good. This is actually a really good setup. That right there. That's a beautiful MK8 setup. This will for your general everyday purposes, for your PLAs and your TPUs, especially TPUs, I'll take an MK8 over an E3D any day. They're just, it's not that they're better, it's just a shorter filament path, especially if you have a direct drive. I mean, that's the only way I do TPUs, direct drive. But it's just a shorter filament path than the E3Ds. Other than that, they're both the same. Not only that, it's better to have the PTFE liner when you're using TPUs and most PLAs, because it actually, the TPUs and the PLAs actually stick to metal very hard. So having an all metal hot end and all your printing is PLA and TPUs isn't worth it. You're wasting your money, and you're actually likely to cause yourself clogs and jamming because of the all metal. But anyway, you can use different mixes and matches. Now, you do have to be careful about the meeting faces, because some of them have different faces meetings. Micro Swiss have their own hot ends. If you do the full kit, you have to get their nozzles, because the shape of the way it meets needs to be a certain shape and meet together so it doesn't leak. But in general, an MK8 and an E3D will match and work just fine. So yes, you can use different ones. But then again, it's going to give you a different temperature requirement to make it all work. But it'll work just fine. And that's the stainless steel crappy one. Having the smaller nozzle is going to give you a different temperature if it works at all. Having the actual E3D nozzle is going to give you a different temperature reading. But that's why we get such different temperature readings and requirements. You know, some people will, oh, you're 5 degrees too hot. Well, maybe he's not. Is it a good suggestion to say you should try 5 degrees cooler or 5 degrees hotter? Yes. But to be specific and say, well, I have to run at 205, so everybody should have to run at 205 to run this material. No. That's why there's such heavy variances in like the factory requirements or the factory suggestions. Most PLAs say are 190 to 220. Because of all these variances, there's no way to say a set temperature, because it's just impossible. I mean, it's going to vary depending on all these, hardware pieces. So anyways, that's why we get such different readings when we use different hot ends, or even the same hot end.